The trial of Aaron Dean comes to an end with a former Fort Worth officer sentenced to nearly 12 years behind bars. That same jury found him guilty of manslaughter nearly 1 week ago for the 2019 shooting death of Atatiana Jefferson.
Right, our Chris Sadeghi is live in Fort Worth this morning, and Chris, jurors were very intentional in their sentencing.
Yes, they were, Cleo. It took them 13 hours to decide on a sentence that could have ranged anywhere from 2 to 20 years for the crime of manslaughter. And when their verdict was read in court, it was obvious they'd handed down not just a sentence, but also a message, a very irregular sentence term of 11 years, 10 months, and 12 days for Aaron Dean. The 10 months and 12 days correlating with October 12th, the day Atatiana Jefferson was killed in 2019. The same jury convicted Dean of manslaughter last week, the first time a Tarrant County jury has ever convicted a former police officer for an on-duty shooting. Prosecutors said afterwards this is not a conviction of all police officers, adding that there are a lot of great officers, but that Dean is not one of them. Once the jury was done, the family of Atatiana Jefferson got their chance in court to address Dean face-to-face.
Atatiana Jefferson was a bright, vibrant light. See, Aaron Dean, what you thought when you shot our baby through her heart was that you were gonna put her light out. But I'm here to tell you that Atatiana was that light that refuses to die.
I pity your ignorance. You do not know enough to be ashamed. You went into an American citizen's home because their doors were open, and you shot a black woman to death in front of an 8-year-old child.
And Dean's family left the courtroom without saying anything, but Jefferson's family had more to say after those impact statements. They held a press conference at Atatiana's home with civic leaders. We'll hear from them coming up in 30 minutes. Karen, Cleo.
And I know we hear that number, Chris, but we know that prisoners do not always serve their entire sentence. So what is the earliest that Aaron Dean could actually be released?
Well, since Texas allows prisoners to apply for parole after half of their sentences served, he would be eligible after about 6 years or so. It will be up to a parole board to hear whether or not they feel that he is able to go back into society, poses any more threat, or any other reason for his release. Now, the attorneys for Aaron Dean can file an appeal up to 30 days after this verdict, and he will still remain in custody, though, while that appeals process does play out. Leo, back to you.
All right, thanks for the insight, Chris.
Chris, thank you. We heard from Atatiana's family during Chris Sadeghi's hit, but we know it's not just the Jeffersons who were passionate. There's an entire community concerned about the future of Fort Worth.
I'm still processing it, but the max is what I was looking for.
We have to change our policing in the city of Fort Worth, and that's a hill that we're gonna have to climb.
Now, you just heard from Atatiana's former neighbor and one of Fort Worth City Council members, Chris Nettle. Both men now looking at what comes next following Dean's sentencing.
So speaking of looking ahead, we do want to bring in the attorney for Atatiana Jefferson's family, Lee Merritt. Thanks for being up early with us this morning. We appreciate it. You know, we understand we watched the video yesterday, but we were not there in court. So you've been by this family's side for years. What was that like inside the courtroom when that sentencing came down?
Oh, it's such a major relief now. This family has been waiting for, as you know, for almost 3.5 years since the murder of Atatiana back in October of 2012. And so you can almost just feel a weight lifted off the courtroom, off the community, and specifically off this family who's been waiting for their opportunity in court.
Lee, what would you say is next for Atatiana's family?
Well, we know that Aaron Dean will continue the process of appeals, and he has every right to appeal under American jurisprudence. For the family, however, we're pushing forward for additional accountability. So we're asking for the Department of Justice to come in and file federal civil rights criminal charges against Aaron Dean as we push forward our federal civil rights suit.
Now, we've seen you in other cases. We were actually just talking about some of that during the commercial break, but both of them, John, involving former Dallas officer Amber Geiger, Jonathan Price, who was killed by a Wolf City officer. So was there something different? And I think that most people were looking at this case that you felt like stood out from the others that we've seen.
Well, in Tarrant County, a really conservative county in Texas, law enforcement community lined up to say what Aaron Dean did was wrong. And so many people in the community, stakeholders in the community, agreed that he should be held accountable, but that that waiting period of 3.5 years, along with the history of Texas of lack of accountability for police officers, had so many of us on pins and needles. And so this was a case where there was almost universal agreement that this officer should pay the consequences for his actions. But number one, we had an extenuated waiting period due to COVID, due to the George Floyd movement, due to a number of things. And we had this family who was just waiting for justice.
Lee, are there any other, changes that the family is fighting for? And I guess if you can explain to people, what was the significance in the sentencing date that jurors gave?
Sure thing. The changes the family are looking for is specifically about Fort Worth police policy. What Aaron Dean relied on in his defense and what so many officers rely on in their defense is that they were simply following their training. And as much as we don't want to scapegoat their training, there's something to be said that these officers are being told when you go into black communities, when you go into black homes, you can treat them more militantly than you would the average community. This jury came back and gave a sentence of 11 years, which we point out is the age of a Zion Carr who witnessed his auntie killed, and then 10 months and 12 days. And we believe that has a correlation to the date that she was killed, which was October 12 of 2019.
Very interesting.
All right, listen, thanks for your perspective and insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you,
It's an
sir.
early day. It's been a long process, but we appreciate you coming in.
I appreciate you all covering this and saying her name.
Lee,
And
thank you.
we've been talking about this
Yeah.
case for weeks now, obviously for years. So we have much more coverage of this trial on our website, including the testimony from Atatiana Jefferson's 11-year-old nephew who was with her the night she was shot and killed, as you heard Lee mention. So that is all at WFAA.com.
Right.